and welcome the whole Sangha member for today's very interesting area for discussion that we're going to talk about the structure and meaning and the purpose of Buddhist perspective. So that is something which is very interesting, and this we are doing under the Buddhist Ambedkar Center for Epistemology, Mind, and Social Transformation, and so. Uh, to very frankly speaking, this particular area is very interesting for all of us because today we are uh, engaging ourselves as Buddhist uh, and also an Ambedkar, right? And so uh, it becomes very important for us to understand what does it mean to be as a Buddhist or to be as an Ambedkar, right? Going back to a very uh, see one point of time we had a very broad our one kind of a reality that we had as we were like ex untouchables. It is the Baba Sahib who in 1956 embraced Buddhism, and he basically has revitalized Buddhism in India, and that's how we then uh, got reconnected to Buddhism. So that is our Buddhist. So we become Buddhist then after. So it is also one of the very important thing that what we acknowledge in what Baba Sahib's contribution for us, that he helped us or he relinked us to our original identity, that is the Sakya identity. So he could able to establish the our linkages or lineages to Buddha's clan, that Sakya clan. So that is something which is very so. If you look at we as an the community is has a very direct linkage to Buddhist ideas, philosophies, and that basically having of. So, but having saying so, what we are then again the question comes like we have progressed so much over these years, like in terms of our ideas. We have educated last almost 70 years that we could when we have embraced Buddhism. uh, Academically we have progressed. There is a very cultural progress that we basically seeing. We also been saying there is a uh, uh, our interest in Buddhism over these years in terms of studies, in terms of academic writing has very growing very so much in these days, and we also able to so in a way what we are trying to see is that our uh, the as a Buddhist we have been able to grow in a very wider just a minute. Yeah. So this is one. So second, another very important thing is if you look at the whole um, Buddha's endeavor in terms of his own search, uh, the Buddha himself has looked for in search of the ultimate truth, and in his inquiry of truth, he could able to come down to a very interesting his own understanding. He could able to see there is something which is impermanence in the whole of this existence of the universe or the world, or there's nothing something which is called the concept of nothingness that he could ultimately come down to. And with having considering to that, and then he looks at the whole idea of middle path that he brought us to us, where uh, and then he says that the ultimate uh, goal of we as a human being is to have a well-being of all the beings, including humans or all existing and living and non-living beings. So that is what is the ultimate purpose, or sometimes the ultimate goal of Buddhism that basically having of. So, so it is in that broad context. It becomes very important for us to understand how do we understand, or if there is a question like when we say we are as a Buddhist, what does it mean? What is the meaning of a Buddhist, or what is the purpose of being in a Buddhist? So these are the very larger areas that probably I also was very looking for, and these are the major inquiries that we need to hunt. Probably, I request Dr. Bodhi to come and uh, have some of his reflections on this particular area, and then we'll take it towards the further for discussion. Thank you, Dr. Bodhi.
So thank you so much. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Yeah.
So the topic that we kind of decided to have a discussion today is on the structure of meaning and purpose in the way it is understood in Buddhism. So the reason that one has used this concept structure is to basically engage from a theoretical perspective in trying to comprehend what exactly does one refer to when one uses the word meaning, and in direct relation to this idea called meaning, what does it mean to use the word purpose? These words at the level of the day to day in which we use to engage, to explain, to experience, and also to relate sounds very simple. And it sounds as though many of us understand what it really actually refers to. But if you look at these words a little bit more from a theoretical point of view, from a view that basically tries to unravel the nitty gritties and the structures of what this word refers to, then it's actually one of the most difficult words to understand. We use it normally as in to refer to, some people at certain points of time, they will uh, engage in a certain process and they will say that, I find a lot of meaning in doing whatever I'm doing. On the other hand, there will be some people who will say that I don't find any meaning in whatever I'm doing. For instance, some of us who are attempting in our own ways to practice Buddhism, we find Buddhism a very meaningful framework. But others don't find it meaningful at all. They find other frameworks very meaningful. Sometimes we are reading certain things, and let's say it could be a text. That particular text makes a lot of meaning to us. For example, we read the writings of Babasaheb Ambedkar, and it makes a lot of meaning to everything that we are experiencing. It makes a lot of meaning to our own lives. On the other hand, we read certain texts by other thinkers, other authors. We don't find any meaning in whatever they're writing. So, this word meaning, although it sounds very simple, actually it refers to very complex processes if you were to look at it a little bit more closely. I've heard many of my, because I teach, so I've heard many of my own students, they will say that we find a lot of meaning in certain classes. While in certain classes taught by some teacher, they will say that we don't find any meaning at all in those classes. It's meaningless. And when I ask them exactly why is it meaningless, they say that we can't connect at all with what that person is saying. Either we can't connect because of the fact that we don't understand the language, either we cannot connect because what the teacher is speaking and what kind of a life experience I have are totally different, or we cannot connect simply because of the fact that it doesn't interest me. So this concept of meaning, actually, although it is spoken in a very, one can use the word doxological, in a commonsensical manner, it has a very, it connotes something very, very unique and something very, very different. And then that's why we are sitting down today thinking how we will think, and how should we think, and how could we think about this notion, this concept, this idea we call meaning. Also, in relation to the this concept called meaning, another word that is very closely related to this word called meaning is the word called purpose. You would have heard many times saying that, I find this engagement of mine very meaningful. And from this meaningful engagement, I draw a lot of purpose. Sometime when I come for gathering of this kind and I listen to some of these topics that we are discussing, it gives me a sense of purpose of what I am doing. It forces me to commit myself to a purpose. Or I realize what the purpose of life is. Or I realize what the purpose of what is happening in the context at this point in time is all about. So this word purpose also is very closely related to the word called meaning. And I think it's very important to kind of bring the relationship between these two words, simply for the fact that these words, although used commonsensically in our day to day to speak to people, to explain to people what is happening, to give a sense of meaning and purpose to our own life. From a theoretical point of view, it kind of directs us to think a little bit more differently. It directs us to kind of look at it a little bit more deeply and to unravel some of the components, the elements of what constitutes these two words. So I think what one can do when one approaches these words, what is this thing called meaning and what is this thing called purpose? And much more from a theoretical point of view, what are the structure of this concept and idea called meaning, and what is the structure of this concept called purpose? Especially in the light of the kind of framework that each of us are now embracing, or each of us are basically practicing, as in referring to the Buddhist framework. As Buddhists, what does Buddhism have to say about this idea we call meaning and purpose? Now, for anybody who has given a little bit more of a deeper thought, the minute you say, what does Buddhism have to say about idea and purpose, you have to first clarify what Buddhism is. Because without clarifying or having some kind of a clarity of what Buddhism is, it is impossible then to kind of unravel both the elements and the structure of this category called meaning and purpose. Now, again, we will be confronted with another very different kind of a set of ideas the minute you ask the question, what is Buddhism? Because all of us think that we understand what Buddhism is, but Buddhism is not so easy to understand until unless you go into the nitty-gritty from a theoretical perspective. People might say, I'm a Buddhist, and someone might ask, what do you mean by saying that you're a Buddhist? Oh, I'm a follower of the Buddha. Who is this Buddha? What do you mean by the word Buddha? So if you ask questions of that kind, you begin to realize it's not so simple to say I'm a Buddhist. Now, the debate regarding this comes down to a point that if one was to say and use the word Buddhist, or I'm a follower of Buddhism, or I'm a practitioner of Buddhism, one is actually referring to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. or what is called the Tiratana. So whenever you say that I'm a Buddhist, you are basically saying I am one who have embraced a particular framework that constitutes of three core interlinked elements called Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Some people use that as a short form and says Buddha, Dhamma, and they leave out the Sangha. But if you go into the details, you cannot leave out the Sangha because the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha is one. So when you say that you're a Buddhist, you are first confronted with this framework of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and we call it Tiratana. Why is there a need to do this? There's a need to do this because sometimes many of us get trapped into constructs that have evolved or produced by history and historical context. And we embrace those concepts without understanding the historical process and the structure of that particular concept in time. So I think each of us who are Buddhists, we know that the word Buddhism is a little bit of a Western European, American kind of a contextual reality in which it got constructed. Because the word Buddha makes a lot of meaning to us, but the word Buddha and ism is not an organic category that has arisen from the framework of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. It is actually a British construct. It's a Western European construct of people who are trying to understand the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, but begin to talk about the Buddha as, a person in which certain kind of people kind of worship. And they add the word of ism, which is generally meaning doctrine. So the doctrine of this person called the Buddha is what Buddhism is all about. So to use the word Buddhism or to use the word Buddhist in that sense, if you're not aware of this historical context, you generally get to get trapped, forgetting that the word Buddhism or Buddhist means Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Now, the minute you say that you are a person who have embraced a framework called the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and let me use a better word for this. The minute you say you have embraced a frame of reference called the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, then this framework, again, now you have to dig deep into the nitty-gritty of this particular framework. What does it mean to use the word Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha? And after you have kind of understood the words individually, these words doesn't allow you to look at it in isolation. They are all related to each other as one. You cannot speak about the Sangha as outside of the framework of the Dhamma and the Buddha. You cannot speak about the Buddha as something outside the Dhamma and Sangha, and neither can you speak about the Dhamma as outside the Buddha and the Sangha. They're all related concepts, intrinsically linked to each other, representing a certain kind of reality. In Buddhism, we say that the Buddha, the Dhamma, Sangha, a framework and a frame of reference given to us by this master teacher of the Sakya community or the Sakya clan called Siddhartha Gautama. This framework or this frame of reference is the closest conceptual framework in relation to reality as it is. This theory of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha or the Tiratana is the closest to what reality is. So what does it mean to say that it is the closest? It means that if there's something called a reality that we all experience, whether this reality is outside of us or inside of us, objective or subjective, or inside our mind, or a reality in which we are part and parcel or swimming into that reality, a framework called the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha is the closest to explain what that reality is or to represent that reality in our mind. So this Tiratana is a framework that represents what the reality is actually at the closest possible level. Now, the minute you think like that the Tiratana is a framework representing the reality as it is. It is not the reality, but it represents the reality. The Buddha, the Dhamma, Sangha is not the reality. These are concepts used by us to help make meaning with what we are trying to understand. Yet these concepts, although they are not the reality, they are closest possibly to a particular reality in which we experience on a day-to-day basis. Now, this reality, in the way we have discussed and the way they talk about in Buddhism, has its own laws, its own ways in which we can understand. One of the most popular ways in which people try to understand these interlinked, intrinsically linked Tiratana is to refer to the Sangha as a realm of reality in which relativity or the relative principle governs. The Sangha is a reality in which the principle of relativity or the relative principle fundamentally governs. The other way to say is the Sangha is rooted in the principle of relativity. And relativity here means in relation to or in relative to something that is related to other. And the other word that people generally use that to explain this notion called relativity is words like dualism, words like dialectics. So dialectics, dualism, binary, these are the words that people generally use to explain the relative principle. And simply it means that it's a principle by which there are always two. There cannot be a single one truth in that reality. There can always be multiple truths, and each of these truths are related to each other. So certain people also use the word binary or binary principle, which means nothing stands on its own. Everything stands and makes meaning only in relation to something else. Example, you cannot use the word black until unless exists another word called white. Because black becomes meaningful in relation to white. If you speak about black in isolation, without any kind of relationship to anything else, that word black does not make any meaning. Another example is, you cannot use the word tall. If you use the word tall in isolation, it doesn't have any meaning. Only if you say tall in relation to short, then the word tall becomes meaningful. So this particular realm called the Sangha realm is the realm that is fundamentally governed and defined by relativity or the relative principle. And in this particular realm, the Buddhist thinkers and Buddhist teachers and Buddhist practitioners and even the Buddha himself uses the category conventional truth, the realm of conventional truth. And by conventional truth means the realm in which there is no single truth, there are multiple truths, all in relationship to each other. And this particular realm is a realm that you cannot run away from. You have to experience it. And this is the beauty. There are many frameworks that says the same thing, but Buddhism has a little bit more of a different take on this. Because Buddhism doesn't say that you can run away, you are born in this realm, but you cannot run away from this realm. You have to experience this realm. And the other ways to explain is to use the word, this is a realm, or the Sangha realm, or the Sanghic realm, is a realm defined by form, matter, and substance. So the fundamental building blocks of this realm is called matter. And you can go as deep as you want to as regards what matter is, from the perspective of the building blocks of a reality that we experience, and we ourselves are constituted by matter. Everything around us that we see that is physical in nature is constituted by matter. Even the non-physical realm, which you think is just nothing but space itself, is constituted by matter. So there's matter everywhere. You're not out of matter. You are matter. So this matter is produced or is organized or it evolves as form. So you have matter that creates the form of a tree. You have matter that creates a form of a human being. You have matter that creates itself as water. You have matter that creates itself as a bird, as a dog, as various types of animals and various types of physical realities, and so on and so forth. And this particular form is constituted by a substance of a particular kind. Not all constitute of the same substance. There are some things in this particular universe that constitute of different combinations of matter to produce whatever kind of a reality. If we're talking about water, then it's two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom, so H2O. So yes, the matter is the same, but how substance is basically produced and what type of substance is produced is different depending on the constitutive elements of matter. And each of that matter, which is a substance, then produce a kind of a form. So if you look outside of your window, you'll see a hill. Hill is a form. It has a particular form. It has shape. It has size. It has width. It has breadth. It has length. So if you look at a tree has form. It has height. It has breadth. It is this fat. It's that. It has all kinds of shapes and sizes and length and breadth and so on and so forth. So this realm of the Sangha, the realms of matter, form, and substance. In the Buddhist literature, you'll find people talking about this realm as a realm defined by relative principles or the law of relativity. At the same time, it is a realm of conventional truths, the experience of truths, conventional multiple truths. So in this realm, you have to eat. In this realm, you have to breathe. In this realm, you have to walk. In this realm, you have to do many things. Okay, this is a realm of so many things that happens in the day-to-day and so on and so forth. And in this realm, whatever you see, you will see certain things. Okay, you will not be able to see many of these so-called micro levels of waves and particles, but there are certain kind of realm in which you can see. Okay, there are colors that you can see. There are things that you can smell. There are certain kind of pitch of waves that you can hear. There are certain kinds of things that you can taste, and there are certain things that you can experience as touch in your body. So when you use the word conventional realm, you're also referring to the realms of the experiences of the senses, our senses. So this is an important realm. This thing called the Sanghic realm, or the realms of Sangha, the realms of relative truth, the realms of binary truths, the realms of conventional truths, the realms of sensation and the realms of perception and the realms of taste and touch and smell and and sight and hear. So this particular realm is a realm in which we generally refer to as the Sanghic realm. Now, before I go into a little bit about why we are talking about this particular realm in the way we are doing, we have to also speak a little bit about what is the Dhammic realm, or the realms of Dhamma. Now, the realms of Dhamma is generally referred to as the realms of the totality of what the reality is in terms of laws. Any deep understanding of the word Dhamma would refer to the great law, the overarching laws of the universe, in which everything basically is to a great extent either organized, governed, or defined. So in this particular realm, generally people are now talking about, at least some of us, at least in India, we're talking about these realms, or what is generally also used as the Dhamma Viharas. The Dhamma Viharas are the location by which the laws of the universe, both the external laws that governs our matter, form, and substance called gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and the weak nuclear force. These are the forces that basically governs our life. And because we are Buddhists, and Buddhism is a framework that also has the capacity of looking within, turning the gaze within, turning your lens inside the subjective realms of your being. We also talk about what is understood called upekha, equanimity, mudita, a equanimous joy, karuna, compassion, and also metta, called love, or generally people use the word loving kindness. But we are referring to of the states of the reality. We're not referring to some capacity of the human brain or human being. That also actually applies. But we are referring to what are the laws of the universe. If you were to look outside and look inside, if you look outside, you will find gravity, electromagnetism, and all the other forces, the four forces that operates. And if you look inside, you also find another four, which is the capacity for equanimity, the capacity for equanimous joy, the capacity for compassion, and the capacity for what is generally called loving kindness. So the characteristics of the Dhammic realm is governed by 8 very, very fundamental forces. And the Buddha has basically spoken in detail about this, although the Buddha didn't speak about what is generally called gravity and electromagnetism, although he spoke about dimensions of reality on the other hand, because he was looking inside into his own kind of subjective experience bounded by his thing called the body. So he was looking inside the body and like a scientist studying what the body is and the laws that operates within the body. So he found these beautiful 4 laws. But the Dhammic realm in totality constitutes of many more laws, and we have been able to, at least in our group, within the Buddhist framework in India, some of us are talking about the 8 forces that operates in all of the Dhammic realm. Now, to engage with the Dhammic realm, we have to also understand what is the realms of the Buddha. And in short, although need to go into details at this particular point in time, when we are using the word Buddha, we are referring to the realms of the totality of the universe as it is. Not as it appears to you and me in the Sangha, not as it appears to our senses as human beings. By senses, I mean not as it appears as our touch, taste, smell, hearing, and sight, but the reality as it is. And here, generally people I like to use the word reality as it is, and I like to use the word truth here as not ultimate, because some people say ultimate truth. But I like to use the word here as truth, the reality as it is. Okay, there is no, the reality in the realms of the Buddha is a reality where you experience what the reality is is. And to me, the word that basically explains a human being's experience of the reality as it is the word Nibbana. Nibbana is when you as a human being, through deep insights and a direct experience of reality, you begin to experience the reality as it is. And this experience of the reality as it is what we can call Nibbanic realm or Nibbana, a state of being, of the experience of that reality as it is. So now that we have touched about a little bit about what this Buddha or Dhamma and Sangha in the light of Buddhism. So when we use the word I am a Buddhist or we are followers of Buddhism, we are referring to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And now that we have clarified, I will come back to the topic that we are supposed to discuss today. This word called meaning is something that basically is to a great extent fundamental only in the realms of the Sangha, only in the realms of form, matter, and substance. Because we are matter, we are substance, we are form, and because we live in a realm that is fundamentally defined by relative reality and relative truth, or conventional truth, or conventional reality, because we have to live in that realm, the word meaning is a very meaningful word. But meaning is meaningful because meaning itself requires 2 things to become meaningful. To say and to use the word meaning is to accept that there is something called a relationship between you and something else. It can be a relationship between you and a certain context. It can be a relationship between you and the mirror that you look at every day. It can be a relationship between you and a book that you're reading. It can be a relationship between you and the government and the state and the constitution. It can be a relation between you and the forests and the trees and the climate and the kind of environment at the level of the globe. Or it could simply be between you and another person. It could be you and, let's say, you're in a family. It could be you and your wife, or your wife and husband, or you and your children and the children in relation to you. So this word meaning is relative. It needs a relationship. If you say, I have a family and we have a very meaningful relationship in our family, you are referring to the relationship between you and someone else in the family. I find a very close, meaningful engagement with, let's say, if you have two in your family. I have a very meaningful relationship with my son. Sometimes I don't have such a meaningful relationship, let's say, with my daughter. Or I have a very close, meaningful relationship with my daughter. Sometimes I cannot understand my son, how my son behaves. Or, for instance, how, let's say, my wife behaves or my husband behaves, and so on and so forth. These are the relationship that you basically build. And remember, at the end of the day, although it's a relationship, it's about you. Because when you use the word meaning, you are saying, is it meaningful to me? You might not be asking, is it meaningful to the other? Some people ask, we are in a relationship with each other. Do you find the relationship meaningful? The person will say, sometimes I'm not able to understand. Sometimes I lose meaning. I don't connect properly with you, which means there's a meaninglessness arising. But sometimes, I find so much meaning, when I sit and discuss with you and I talk with you, there is so much meaning in the discussion that we have. There's so much meaning in this kind of relationship that we have. The minute you use something like that, it means each of you are basically making meaningful relationship with each other. Now, this is interesting in the sense that some of us do take the opportunity to ask the other, do you find this meaningful? Okay, if you're a conscious being, if you're a conscious Buddhist, you will always ask the other, is it meaningful? Like, for instance, I will ask you, you're sitting down in a Sunday at 6 o'clock listening to me. Do you find it meaningful? Some of you will say, I don't find it meaningful. What is this guy talking about? Some of you say, yeah, it's very meaningful. It's giving me a lot of sense about what it is all about. It's giving me insights into reality. So what I say, and we are sitting in Zoom, which means you are just hearing and probably seeing me. So what I say and what you are experiencing, is there a meaningful relationship taking place? On the other hand, if you ask me, are you finding it meaningful when you are talking to us? And I will say, I'm finding it meaningful, but that meaning can only arise if I see some of your faces smiling and nodding and saying that we understand. If everybody is, all the faces are blank and someone's looking like this and, not responding, and I'm saying, and then I will say, I find it very meaningless. What am I talking about? Are you even understanding what I'm talking? So if you go deep into the structure of this thing called meaning, it is the kind of relationship that we build. It is relative. It is a kind of relationship that you build between you and everything else in this world. It doesn't have to be a person. You can have a meaningful relationship with your dog, with your cat. Some of you, I know, you have a meaningful relationship with a tree. Some of you have a meaningful relationship with the forest. Some of you have a meaningful relationship with some birds that come and chirps in your day daily. Some of you have a meaningful relationship with a book. It doesn't have to be a being. It can be anything. Sometimes many people will laugh. Some people, like some of us will go, when you go to the forest, we always love to go and just hug the tree, just, to be one with the tree. And then someone will say, why are you doing that for? and you will say that I find a lot of meaning in this. It gives me a tremendous amount of meaning. The kind of reality I come from, understanding I have, it gives a lot of meaning. But for other people, hugging a tree is meaningful. What does that mean? So you will have some of us who have animals at home. I have a dog, and that I have a relationship with a dog, and there is so much meaning that I have in relation to the dog. And a friend of mine would say, meaningful relationship with a dog? What are you saying? Why should you have a meaningful relationship with a dog? So this word meaning, if you go into the details, remember, the point to be made is, it is not only about the being that you get meaning. I have known friends who have found meaning when they stay alone in the jungle. And I asked him, what are you doing in the jungle alone? He said, I find so much meaning in living in this place. I said, you're alone. You're not talking to anybody. You're not seeing another human being. You're just getting up one day. You're taking care of yourself. You're cooking, you're eating, and you're sitting in the jungle. You don't hear a human voice. You don't hear anything. So how exactly are you finding meaning? No. My relationship with the jungle is so meaningful, unimaginable to explain to you. I can't even explain to you. So the structure of this word called meaning, the first element is, it is a relationship. And a relationship that need not be only with beings, it can be with anything. And sometimes people talk about a relationship even with yourself. It is a relationship that you develop with yourself. Some people say you will find some people, and these are a little bit more of the very Buddhist enlightened kind. You are so alone. You are so introverted. You don't talk to anybody. You don't have any friends. And then the answer would be, but I have a very meaningful relationship with myself. So sometimes they're like, how do you have a meaningful relationship with yourself? No, this meaningful relationship with myself is the ability of me to self-respect myself. I respect myself a lot. So self-respect itself is a very meaningful relationship that I have with myself. Dignity is a very self-respecting. Dignity itself is an element of so-called meaningful relationship with self. So many of us who come from the realities, we come from self-respect, dignified life, dignity. These are very important things because they give me meaning. The whole world looks down on me and says all kinds of things about me and denounces the kind of reality I come from and denigrates my reality. But I respect myself, and I find tremendous meaning in this self-respect, tremendous meaning in this dignity. So you see the structure of this thing called meaning. It's everywhere. It is not only something that we in a particular realm. It is like a governing principle of the life of form, matter, and substance, or the Samghik realm. So if you have to think about this word in terms of the theoretical aspects of the structure of the word meaning, the first point, it is a relationship. And a relationship with what? With anything. It doesn't matter. You would be amazed about what kind of relationship human beings can have. Forget about the animal world, which gives us a lot of meaning. It can be with a tree. It can be with a stone. Sometimes it can be with crystal balls. Sometimes it can be with diamond. Sometimes it can be with gold. It can be anything, And there's a relationship to that. Now, the second point, which is important, intrinsically linked and embodied in the notion of relationship, is this word called value. Something that you value is meaningful. So I value your relationship. I value this relationship. That's why it's meaningful. Suppose I don't value. You have a person who believes that this particular stone, this crystal is very important. And if I wear this crystal every day around my neck, nothing will happen to me. But you meet another person who uses the same crystal and think it's some kind of a stone. And it's a weird thing to wear on your neck. So the relationship between the person who makes meaning about the value of that crystal and someone else who says it's just a crystal, why you're wearing it in your neck, is totally different. So this meaning that is made because of the value that you have for a thing. In India, though, you have many people who value, let's say, a thread around your hand. And if the thread has a particular color, I make a very meaningful relationship with a thread in my hand. And if you ask, why do you wear the thread? Or why is it that it's so important to you? Because it's so meaningful to me. Why is it meaningful to you? How does it help you? I value this. That word called value is a very important concept in trying to understand the structure of meaning. So the first point is the relationship. And remember, relationship, why? Because we live in a reality fundamentally governed by relativity or the relative rules or the laws of relativity. There's nothing in matter, form, and substance that is not related to each other. Everything is nothing but a relation. In the world of concepts, we use the word binary. Everything in the world or the conceptual world that you're listening to me, you are actually just engaging with a conceptual world. We don't even, we are far away from each other. Okay. And you're just having a framework. And every one of you sitting here, you have a framework and you're listening to me as I talk to you. Certain things that I say makes tremendous meaning, whatever you are in your own frame of reference. Some of the things I say don't make meaning at all. So it's not important whether it's meaningful or not meaningful. It's important to understand the theoretical aspects of meaning. So the third point that I want to refer here is that meaning requires a frame of reference. Because each of us operate in a frame of reference. If you don't have a frame of reference, the relationship does not occur. And as a matter of fact, it is very rare for human beings not to have. There are people who might not have a frame of reference. Let's say some people who are, have very, very different physical conditions. But even them also. For instance, you have someone who doesn't have eyesight, someone who cannot hear. So what kind of meaning those people make? When sensations are fundamental part of what kind of frame of reference basically is there in the way they look at the world? How do they make meaning with people's voices or people's touch or people's sense or people's smell or people's touch and taste? So this frame of reference is very fundamental. Okay. And I come to you today, suppose, I'll give you an example. I come to you today and I'm talking about a totally different frame of reference. Okay. All of us are Buddhists. So when you listen to me as Buddhists, you also have a very similar frame of reference, not the exact frame of reference, but a similar reference that constitutes of the same concepts. But suddenly, when I come today and I speak about a totally different frame of reference, for instance, example, I come today rather than talking to about Buddhist concepts, Buddhist ideas within the Buddhist frame of reference, I talk to you about Marxism, and I talk about labor, and I talk about value, and I talk about objects of labor, I talk about instruments of labor, and then some people say, "What is this person saying?" I'm not able to understand what this person is saying, which means I'm not able to make meaning with what the person is saying. So this frame of reference is, to me, a third component of the meaning-making structure. I'll give you an example. Many of us have argued and also discussed that this thing called religion is one of the most sophisticated meaning-making framework produced by the human mind. Religion gives people meaning. Now, it is not that people without religion doesn't have meaning. It's just that if you look at the way society structures itself, or if you look at the way you structure yourself, there is this realm called a frame of reference. The other word, a religion, that actually helps you give a lot of meaning in your life. If something happens to you, and let's say that particular something that happens is some kind of a disaster, religion is a frame of reference that gives you meaning. If you go to, you would have heard, if you go to certain places where, someone has died, and you listen to what kind of words people speak when you go to someone's house just to condole and a condolence to that particular family, what will you say? If you believe in a particular religion, you say, it doesn't matter at all. The person has died, but this person has gone and stayed and will be with God forever. So you should not worry. You should not feel sad. Because that person, although has left this world, yet it is with God. And God will take care. And that person feels, I feel at ease now. Now, is that a truth? We do not know. Whether that person has gone really in the realms of God, we do not know. But in the meaning-making frame of reference, it makes a lot of meaning. I have traveled a little bit as a faculty from the Tata Institute, and I had gone to a lot of places for disaster, on that experience a disaster. During the tsunami, I had gone and had an experience in Andaman Nicobar Islands. I went to a village in which half the village was washed out. And I was talking to the other half that was alive. And I was sitting with them. And at that particular moment, they have lost meaning. How come? They just died. Yesterday, they were sitting with me. One wave come. 4,000 people in the village. 2,000 people have vanished. They're not here anymore. I have lost my meaning. What is life all about? What does it mean? Is there any even meaning to life? Am I just born in order to die? Is there any meaning in this life at all? And then you go and talk to them, there is meaning in life. Probably, this happened because this is, you start giving, multiple, they call that in the kind of field that we work in, they call it counseling. They start counseling you, to try to give you back that meaning into your life. So this frame of reference is a very important way when we think about the structure of meaning. Now, I think we can go on into this because there's so many concepts that are there in this meaning. And the fourth one generally is what we call words, language. Language itself is ideological. Language itself is an ideological apparatus, an ideological setup. The language that you speak is not non-ideological. If you speak the language of English itself is an ideology. It's a way in which people perceive the world, structure the world, interprets the world. If you speak Marathi itself is an ideology. To think that it's just merely a commonsensical language that has no ideology is too commonsensical and too simplistic to understand this realm called language. Because language itself is a construct, and this construct, constituted by a number of words, creates a framework, and this framework itself is a frame of reference. So if sometimes you will use this word, I'm from Maharashtra, I speak Marathi. In Marathi, it means like this. Someone will say, no, I'm from Karnataka, I speak Kannadiga, I speak Kannada, and then in Kannada, it means like this. Or someone will say, I'm from an English background. In English, it means like this. What does it mean to say like that? The reason you're able to say that is because it's a frame, it's a framework. So it's like we can call it an ideological infrastructure constituted by many of these words. And language is very closer to your lived experience. So in Maharashtra, it's very interesting. If you go to Nagpur has a different way of speaking, and they'll say, "Arey, in Nagpur we speak like this," And then someone will say, "I come from Konkan," and people, in Konkan we speak like this. So what is it that you are intersecting with each other? Is it language? No, you're intersecting these conceptual frameworks in which meaning is actually embodied or embedded within a particular conceptual framework. So there are many things like this, and what I have mentioned about this relationship, this idea of value, this idea of frame of reference, and the idea of the conceptual apparatus, which is language, all constitutes this world that we live in within a bounded realm of matter, substance, and form that gives us this thing called meaning. The one question I used to ask myself, if by any chance, many of us who are practitioners, and we do Anapanasati, we do Vipassana, we go deep into experiencing Dhamma, deep into experience the Buddha, I used to ask myself, does the Buddha need meaning? Would a Buddha be one who needs meaning? Is meaning fundamental to the Buddha? And the more deeper I think, probably each of us will have different answers, but my answer is, my understanding, not an answer, my understanding is, the Buddha doesn't need meaning at all. Because the Buddha is a realm in which meaning has got dissolved. There is no need for meaning. The Buddha stands alone. No need to be in relation to anything else. But all of us are not Buddha because we are defined by the Sanghic realm of matter, substance, and form. And we need meaning. It's very difficult for us as human beings, unless you become a Buddha, which means you experience the reality as it is. Very difficult for us to say, I have no meaning in my life. Whatever I am doing at this point of time, I don't care whether it's meaningful or not. I have a job, but the job is meaningless. I just do it for the sake of doing. I have a family, but the family is meaningless. I just live because I have to live. It's very difficult to speak like that. It's not so easy for us to live a life like that. Oh, you finish your job. Yeah, where are you going? I'm going home. But, I really don't care because there's no meaning in my home. It's very difficult to say like that. People say, if I go home, I hope I will get some meaning. That's a meaningful place for me. So So this thing called, I used to ask this question whether the Buddha makes meaning. So the Buddha is free from the concept of what we call relations. Okay, free from the concept of what we call value. Value, not value the other, not value in yourself. You know, free from the concept of a frame of reference. Okay, they have an overarching, massive, all exhaustive, all embracing frame of reference, so massive that you can't imagine, because there's an infiniteness, there's no end, no boundary to the frame of reference. In their frame of reference, you and me are bounded. If someone asks me, who are you? The first thing I would say, I'm a Buddhist, which means I'm bounded by a frame of reference. But if you ask a Buddha, who are you? Probably the Buddha's answer is, I am nothing. Because the Buddha is not defined by a boundary of a frame of reference. I am infinite. I don't need a frame of reference to make meaning in this world. You know? And the last point of a conceptual structure. Each of you and me, we are sitting down here talking to each other in just using language. And we assume that we understand English in the way we understand probably, the meaning of each word that I've used. But it's a fact that how all of us sitting today discussing, some of you might not have the same meaning with the words that I'm using. Some of you will say, how can that be? Sangha doesn't mean matter, form, and substance. Sangha means bhikkhu and bhikkhuni. And then I'm saying, no, Sangha doesn't mean bhikkhu, bhikkhuni. It means matter, form, and substance. How is it possible? So immediately you'll say, no meaning is made with me. After 2 days, you'll say, now it's meaningful. Now I'm starting to understand why they use the word in that particular manner. You see, even the usage of language each of us don't have the same understanding of the words that we use. So let me regarding the theoretical infrastructure or the theoretical structure of the word meaning, let me just end with these 4 concepts that I have generally thrown about. The notion of relation, the notion of value, okay, the notion of frame of reference, and the notion of what I call the conceptual apparatus or language. Now, the last point which I want to make before I end is then how is all this related to the word called purpose? What is this thing called purpose? Some of you will use the word, the day Baba Saheb became a Buddhist and I am a follower of Baba Saheb, I have found so much purpose in my life. Before that, many people in my community, they live a purposeless life. There is no purpose. I don't know what is the reason I'm alive? Is there a purpose why I'm alive? Should I just be alive in order to die? Why am I studying? Why am I working? And why am I working this particular work? Why am I not doing anything else different? Is my purpose to bring change? Is my purpose to become a good human being? Is my purpose to reclaim myself? Is my purpose to find meaning in this world? What is my purpose in this world? I don't understand what is my purpose. Whenever I feel that, I'm trying to get a purpose, I lose my purpose. And in losing purpose, I lose my total meaning that I make with life. And, many of us have had friends who have experienced these kind of things, and many very nasty things have happened to them. Some of them have gone to the extreme of taking away your life, their own life, because they find no meaning and no purpose in life at all. And someone will come on the other hand, exactly the opposite. The day I read Baba Saheb Ambedkar, I found purpose in my life. Now I'm living a purposeful life. Now my life has purpose. Now I know why I'm alive. This is just not a life that I should live and wait when I will die. It's a life that I have to fulfill something. I have to become something. I have to contribute to my community. I have to change this reality. Now purpose starts arising. And a person who has found purpose cannot be stopped. Only people who don't know their purpose can be easily fooled around. You can make them run around in circles. But a person who has a purpose, you cannot stop that person because the person knows what they want. And you cannot stop a person who knows what they want. You can only stop a person who doesn't know what they want. And why don't you know what you want? Because you don't know what your purpose is. And why don't you know what your purpose is? Is because your realms of meaning making is still all over the place. You need to find meaning in whatever you're doing, because meaning then gives purpose. And this purpose brings tremendous amount of what you understand called value in your life. Self-respect is a very important word in purpose. Dignity is a very important word in purpose. Some will say, you are, a very principled. You don't say this, you don't do this, you don't behave like this. And your answer will be because I want to protect my dignity at any cost. I will not allow anybody to trample on me and oppress me and exploit me. I will not be used for any other purpose other than my own self-respect and dignity. Okay? And you might like me or don't like me, I don't care. But I have my dignity intact. What does it mean to say like that? What does it mean to have to find purpose in dignity, purpose in self-respect? I'm an Ambedkarite. And as an Ambedkarite, I am a self-respecting, dignified human being. What does it mean to say something like that? What is the need to be dignified or being self-respecting? And what emerges from self-respect and dignity? Purpose. You begin to have a purpose in your life. You cannot be thrown here and there like anybody else. So connected to this word called meaning is this very important word called purpose. And we can go deeper into this word called purpose, because it's used very normally. Like, sometimes, let's say people like us who are teachers, I go into a particular class and people like us, we go with a sense of a seriousness of purpose. I go into class and when I teach means I really teach. Because first of all, I love teaching and I'm in love with what I teach, and I believe that what I teach is very important. Okay. I go with a sense of tremendous purpose. And then I go to a class that is looking at me like this and wondering why I'm talking and when I should be leaving. And in just a few moments, I lose every purpose that I have. Now, for a long time, all of us who are teachers, all of us who are students, we know that this happens, But for some of us who are not driven too much by what others' response is, so for me, whether people respond in a negative or the positive, they like or don't like, doesn't matter. But I am serious about my purpose. So you will see many people, and you will experience yourself in your own life. So this exactly is something that is very, very important because we experience it daily. So this notion of a seriousness of purpose, we speak like that. We have friends, and we say, that person has such seriousness of purpose here. That person is so serious. They take themselves very seriously. And that person is so non-serious, purposeless, doesn't know what is happening, just doing whatever doing and just talking whatever they're talking. Sometimes they are not committed to anything they do. You call for a meeting at 4 o'clock to have a very serious discussion. They come at 5 o'clock. You don't know whether they value what this meeting at all. Purposeless person, just moving around wherever the wind blows. They also run like that. So we use this on a day-to-day basis. But you see the importance of understanding these words in the manner that we do, especially within the Buddhist framework. And why is it that I have kind of spoken in this particular manner today? Is because Buddhism is one of the most sophisticated meaning-making framework. Buddhism is it has given purpose back to many lives in this country. Many of us lost purpose in this country. We don't know why we are alive. Some of us have even been reduced to nothing but animals. We don't even realize that we are human beings anymore. We have lost the capacity for being human. That's why Baba Sahib used to always say we have to reclaim our humanity. And in reclaiming of humanity, Baba Sahib gave a framework called Buddhism to find both meaning and purpose in our life again. So Buddhism is a very sophisticated framework of both understanding meaning and understanding purpose. Not only understanding, but reclaiming meaning, reclaiming purpose. In other words, Buddhism has given us a purpose in our life. Now we know why we are alive, and now we know what we should do, and now we know how we should act, and now we know how we should work hard, and now we know what we should achieve, and now we know how we should contribute, and so on and so forth. Not that only Buddhism does it, many other framework does it, but the only uniqueness of the Buddhist framework is there is no God, there is no first principle, and there is no one who is designing this world in an intelligent manner. Because the Buddhist framework doesn't have a God. We don't need God to give us meaning. for other framework, God is the most meaningful concept. Buddhism doesn't need what is generally called the cosmological principle or the first principle. Instead, Buddhism talk about the infinite principle. Everything arises because of the necessary condition. There is no beginning of anything in this world. And that beginning is generally called a first principle. In Buddhism, we don't need a first principle. At the same time, Buddhism doesn't need what is generally called the great design argument or the intelligent design argument. Now the world is so intelligent. Everything, the person who would have crafted this thing called the universe is so intelligent. Look at bacteria, look at matter, look at form, look at substance, look at who you are, look at beings and animals and plants and oxygen and water. It could have been a very intelligent being to have created something like this. Otherwise, impossible. Even the human mind is not so intelligent to create something like this. In Buddhism, we don't buy the intelligent design argument because in Buddhism, we believe strictly in what is generally called evolution and deeper than evolution called anicca. The rise of reality in a state of impermanence because of the existence of necessary condition giving rise from one realm to another realm to another realm to another realm and so on and so forth. So to say that we are engaging in the framework called Buddhism and trying to understand two concepts, meaning and purpose, is a big intellectual theoretical engagement. It's not a small thing. Because understanding Buddhism itself is a big thing, then understanding meaning. For others, it's very simple to understand. For us, it takes a lot of the need for us to come like this, to talk like this, to debate like this, is because Buddhism requires you to come in order to get clarity. You cannot get clarity about these concepts alone, because this framework is too exhaustive, it's too overarching. It doesn't have simple things like God, soul to give you meaning in this world, you know. Instead, it has infiniteness, no beginning, no end, nothing, no thing. It has all different kinds of concepts. And that's why the need for us to kind of sit down and to think seriously as a Buddhist community, or even people who are not Buddhists, also people who are interested in Buddhism as a framework, to kind of comprehend this whole kind of debate. So I will stop here, and I will request Dr. Narendra Kakade to kind of give his views, and probably we can open up for some kind of a reflection. Need not be a question. I'm not someone who can answer anything, but we can reflect together in order to get insights about these realities. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bodhi, giving such an very overarching reflection. To tell you frankly, when I got this to think over, and I was really trying last 10, 15 days since we thought to discuss on this particular area. I tried looking to read on. I couldn't really find anything to read out. So that was something which is very, and I was just trying to think and say, and since morning when we discussed saying that, okay, this is the what we should be talking about, nothing is really going in my head at that point of time. And you could see when I began somewhere, some point, I do realize that I also was somewhere trying to put it, but not. I was really not there. But what makes very important when you said how do we really connect the meaning and the very purpose and the frame of reference, then the very larger content that we're looking at as a Buddhism, uh, as how do we find that purpose? The way we actually have articulated is very, very, very interesting. We talked about the very four important reference points that we mentioned about meaning has to be talking in the context of relationship, which is very important. We talk about the meaning is something to be talking about in the context of value. We're talking about meaning is something to be is very important to have as in a frame of reference. And the meaning also we're talking about talks about the language, the ideological things, and this meaning that we have probably will also connect us to understand the purpose. So and that is how even we should be looking at with this and with this and the purpose of like reclaiming of the our own existence. We're talking about we ourselves have able to we are talking about our self, talking about dignity, self-respect, and the purpose that we actually have having been connected to the Buddhism. But the question really comes at what you have really pointed out is that how do we then look at this whole our experiences, understanding that we had being as a Buddhist, having been trained to Ambedkar and more understanding Buddhism by practicing with its very innate aspect that we will basically having about. So we need to really look at our understanding and particularly the frame of reference we're talking about meaning and the structure of meaning and the purpose of meaning. We have to really go into very details and understand, explain, and think over it. Something which is very interesting. I found it, and there's a very clarity in myself. I could see in the last 1 hour than what I was having before starting to this particular whole idea of meaning and structure, the structure of meaning and purpose in the context of Buddhism give me very clarity. So I think I'm sure there will be some questions from our Sangha members. We can have some of the questions.
Am I audible, Dr. Lin?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Sorry, I will not mute my this power has cut. So okay. So I was just thinking in a one aspect actually. I mean, as theoretically, Professor Bodhi has shared about this meaning and also theorized in terms of the value, in terms of the relation, language, and the frame of reference. So I'm just also thinking around when we like specifically in Buddhism we talk about this process of cultivation, and so theoretically I can understand this entire process of meaning making and also finding the purpose can be like a replicate and one can understand and also can reach certain point, certain like a kind of satisfaction or finding the meaning. But I want you to just to reflect within the Buddhism when we talk about the cultivation as a process, because we have understood that cultivation process is also, I think it's not the process of finding meaning or making the meaning process. And also, I think not for the fulfilling the process of the purpose actually. So what I was just thinking, it's like just for me, that process of cultivation within a one certain kind of value system, I think it gives us a lot of I don't know what to call, but scope to kind of think around the process and also the reality that we that kind of we experiencing, and also we want to sometime to experience or want to when we aspire something to see. So I was just wondering maybe this cultivation process within the meaning and in the purpose, it's somewhere located in that kind of framework, and also looking for theoretically with this relationship value and meaning making, and also in terms of the language. So I was just thinking around this cultivation process, connecting with this meaning making process and the purpose. Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking around. So
But the question, just to continue with what Dr. Nish is also saying, I was really thinking over what does really it mean being as a Buddhist, and what was like what basically the purpose. See, we were talking about yes, we will when being Buddhist, we're talking about reclaiming our own culture, or we are talking about having dignity and sort of self-respect or but is there anything that we have to when we say Buddhist, how the whole we should be able to understand what is the meaning of our own way of exploring the whole as a Buddhist, or the way Buddha actually have tried to uh, understand or find meaning or the reality, and then he come able to understand the meaning of life and the way he able to explain to the meaning of life in whole of his, then he explains to the his the whole Buddha and his whole Dhamma and the Sangha or the whole idea of Buddha, meaning basically talking about what is that he's understanding about whole of a life, and so which then he gives a structure called Sangha and the Dhamma, two very important things, and then the ultimate that we talk about. So, as a Buddhist, how do we be able to make a meaning for ourselves to be on the path of reaching towards that direction? Because we are still at a very initial stage, we are still learning quite a few things. So, when we say, okay, I'm a Buddhist, what does it really mean to me? Other like, okay, we are talking about definitely to be as a human being who is trying to be and very equanimous, to be as looking for the truth or trying to sensing the truth and to be as equanimous as that we can see. These are the very purpose that we're trying to be ourselves in our life, or we are heading towards that. But is there something, or this is the only that we have been looking at, or is there more to looking into the in being as a Buddhist? I mean, that could be one area that we can think of. That was something I was thinking for. I could not able to really frame it up, but somewhere in I was thinking, what does really it mean to be as a Buddhist? What could be the purpose or the structure, the purpose that the Buddhist keeps us to be as a member of the as a sangha or member of the community. So that was something which is very important. I was thinking, and I was not been able to really structure myself to understand or make a sense of it. So this one thing, if we can reflect on. Any other questions?
Sir, we have one question in chat box.
Yeah, so there is a question. Could you please reflect upon if there is any difference between the idea of discourse and frame of reference? And if the discourse is different, then does it also contribute to the structure of meaning? It's very, very interesting. So, should we have any other question, and then what do you want to reflect on?
Yeah, Devi, good morning. Sorry, good evening. I was wondering about when we think of meaning and Buddhist uh, Buddhist principle of living in the present, because like many of the other traditions, uh, talks emphasizes more about like living in the present itself, and because the language, if you look at the construction of language itself, it is associated with meaning, and then there is this very important element called time. It is the way it is divided into past, present, and future. And I have been like reading about Zen tradition, which focuses heavily on the present and uh, not being so attached to the idea of past also, and future also. So, and all this like last time, I think in one of our gatherings, uh, we talked about structuralism, Saussure, and then Levinas and all that. How language itself is a is a structure of meaning, and how transcending the binaries and dissolving the binaries can lead to a meaningless of the structure itself. Uh, this is one point. Second point, I was thinking of like when we think of language itself as a construct, as Bodhi sir made, like Marathi itself is a construct. But how do we think about like this language is an innate capacity of human being to speak and utter the word? Because if you look at the evolution of language itself, we have uttered the word and then the meaning came out. So I think, of course, when we think of on that line of construction and attaching meaning to it, but innate capacity of human itself to speak, to utter the word, I think that is more like a beauty of it. And then how do we think of this from a Buddhist perspective? Because we speak, like animals communicate, but we speak and then there is meaning to the words, and then that leads to a lot of conflict and all. But yeah, like innate capacity of being able to utter the word itself is a beautiful thing. And how would we understand from this from a Buddhist point of view?
So, Vishal and Abhijit, you have wanted to say something which was
Yes, sir. Um, so we talked about structures, meaning, and values. We also talk about understanding um, the relationships between entities. And one of the important parts is understanding the relationship with yourself, or the I and the mind that you have. So, and what we have been attempting to understand is to turn the gaze inwards through, um, like through activities or through devices or help like Sati Patna or Anapanasati. And we also say that Buddhism, as a philosophy, has a lot of virya or energy in itself. And when we are doing Anapanasati or when we are doing Mahasati Patna, we are experiencing the 8 jhanas, Rupa and Arupa jhanas. Um, when all of this is happening, and when we are in the external reality, which is not in our control, um, what what like what happens to the phenomena of structure, purpose, meaning making when there is a crisis of mind? And for us, for Buddhists or for the oppressed in this country, the crisis of mind is not. Uh, I will not be like. Um, I'll not be speaking about other communities, their crisis of mind, but our crisis of mind is of a very different kind, which is both material in nature as well as a lot of philosophical and in terms with oppression or atrocities and emancipation at some point. So when we suffer crisis of mind, and like how uh, like how the Buddha is in a realm where everything is boundless for him, and the values have dissolved, the meaning has dissolved. As a common folk, as a layman, sometimes some people go to that stage of meaninglessness. So how different it would be from what the Buddha has experienced? Like, although I feel like Buddha experienced it in a positive sense, but could this negative sense be the other spectrum or the other polar opposite of what the Buddha has experienced? Because uh, couple couple of issues, or the if we coupled our reality with the crisis which we are going through, these kind of feelings are bound to happen. And the attempt to understand meanings, structure, and purpose, it will take a lot of hit, and we may fall 15, 20 steps back, and we would be very in a position where it would be very difficult to again jump to that kind of even a structure. Even understanding structure or meaning is also one kind of structure in my understanding. So, as Sir said, when someone has a difficult physical reality, how would they experience meaning making? So, along with the physical reality, if the mental fabrication is also distorted or disrupted due to some kind of crisis, um, how would we look into this purpose and meaning making and structure, understanding structure, uh, not in a framework where one is in his senses. I'm not saying that someone is mad, but someone who's experiencing crisis. Such a person, how would he attempt to understand all of these processes? If the question makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijit. There's a one more question, clarification is from Aparna Patil. So Sujit also is there. Can I just read this? Modi, how should we go ahead? Should you want to take some of those and then want to go ahead with others? Or
Let's hear.
take all?
Let's hear everybody first.
It's all okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So the other one is, as discussed, language is within the framework. We are reading, translating books from original Pali or other ancient languages. Could you elaborate how the interpretation of the person who translated and the scope of the two languages might have inferred interfered the meaning of the original verses? That's one question of Aparna Patil. And then there are, I think we have 2-3 hands. Can we have those questions also? Yeah, Anuradha and who else was there? Vishal also there. Anuradha, you can unmute.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for today's session. So I just like to reflect on what we discussed. We looked at meaning, and then we said that there are 4 parameters which we can use to. Meaning requires these 4 parameters: relationship, value, frame of reference, and language. But I feel that, which we have discussed, the underlying thing holding this all together are the Dhamma Viharas, because even if we look at relationship, then my relationship with some living or non-living being is again defined by what I consider as underlying principles. So I think Dhamma Viharas, probably we can discuss it in greater detail. And where do we look at behavior in all this? Because as a Buddhist, I am bound by certain rules to behave in a certain way. But somebody else who comes from a different frame of reference will have a different way of behavior, or they may not have any rules of behavior at all in their frame of reference. So again, I think Dhamma Viharas are the key here. And does Buddha need meaning? And no, Buddha is free from meaning. That is very beautiful. But I also feel that to let go of something, you first need to have it. So to let go of the need to have meaning, you first need to make a lot of meaning of everything that exists around you, and then only you can have the capacity of let go of it. So I think there is a big difference between meaninglessness and freedom from meaning. So so thank you, sir, for today's talk. Thank you, Narendra sir. Thank you.
Anybody else? Subodh, I'm sorry.
Sujit was saying something.
Sujit wanted to say something. Please. Sujit, you're around? Sujit, you are there? I think is it disconnected?
I think he's disconnected. He's not around.
Okay. So can we have reflections of Prabodhi?
Okay. So, a lot of very important points that has come out that spans across, at least theoretically, a very wide theoretical space, right from understanding what does it mean to experience a crisis of not only meaning, but a crisis of the meaning-making framework. What is the kind of reality that begins to unravel when one is living a life in which one's meaning-making framework itself is in a state of crisis?
Mhm.
The second thing is this point about cultivation. Why does Buddhism, why do some of us tend to use the word cultivation? And what is cultivation basically referring to in the engagement within this framework called meaning or meaning making and so on and so forth? Now, cultivation has many other realms of which it can be operationalized. But how do you locate the word or the concept of cultivation within the meaning making framework or within the theory of meaning? What is this idea about the present in Buddhism? There is a past, there's a present, and there's a future. Why is it that Buddhism constantly and persistently stress on living in the present? And why is it so significant? Why is this notion of the present so significant for Buddhists? Why is not the future significant in relation to the present, or the past significant in relation to the present? Then this question about language. And why is this thing called language? And when does this thing called language begins to be a meaning-making framework, to begin to constitute the very structure of meaning itself? Human beings have the capacity to make sounds. When these sounds are shared experience, it becomes some kind of words, and words are located in a language. And human beings are socialized in a particular language. And in the socialization process, you begin to unravel meanings of words in a language. And then you begin to engage with the overarching other realities that exist outside of you by the usage of language. Like, what is this thing called language? When does meaning insert itself, either in the socialization of an individual or a child in language, or does meaning exist prior to language? So that's another kind of a question that was asked. Then this idea of discourse and frame of reference. What does it mean to use the word frame of reference? Can it be so-called supplanted by the word discourse? Can we use the word discourse in the place of frame of reference? If we can, why? If we cannot, then what is the reason that discourse does not immediately equate in this thing called frame, with this idea called frame of reference? And then the latter question about like behavior and this idea of when do we begin to think about behavior as another fundamental element in trying to understand this thing called meaning, especially in the light of what Anuradha mentioned, the Buddha, the Dhamma Viharas, the characteristics, the spaces and the location and the factors and the characteristics of the Dhamma. So I think there are many more questions, and I think many people have pitched it that way. I don't think I can give any answer because I don't think I will have the ability to kind of answer each of these questions, but I will kind of just reflect a little bit here and there, just to kind of, again, make meaning with each other. So our gathering becomes meaningful, you know. Because if you have asked me certain questions and then I go and answer it in a manner in which it is not meaningful, then the purpose of our gathering today is lost. So it's like saying something like that. So let me begin by making one point, making one submission. Babasaheb Ambedkar lived a very meaningful life. He lived a very meaningful life. And there was such a seriousness of purpose in his life that he has become my guiding light. Okay? Babasaheb lives a very meaningful life. He lived a very, very meaningful life. Not many of us live such a meaningful life. And he lived that life, that meaningful life, with such seriousness of purpose that has actually really given me the confidence that it is possible that I also can live that kind of life. When you say something like this, you know, what exactly are you referring to? At least theoretically speaking, what exactly are you referring to? Why is he someone we look up and say that he has lived a meaningful life? Not a single moment in his life was lived without meaning. Every single moment, a number of master's degrees, the number of PhDs, alone sitting down in a library, reading and reading and writing and writing, coming back, struggling and struggling and struggling. You know, what a meaningful life. What are we referring to when we speak? So the first question I think all of us should ask, at least now that we're engaging in theory, you know, in a commonsensical manner, we don't need to ask. But in a theoretical sense, you have to ask, because you are looking at Babasaheb now has become our mirror. I look at him to see myself. Am I living a meaningful life like him? Is there a seriousness of purpose in my life? Whatever I'm doing, is there a seriousness of purpose? Or I'm just doing in order to get something? So the first thing that is fundamental to this thing is the word process. There are certain people who are output driven. They are only doing certain things, envisaging an output. If that output is good, then what I did was great. If that output is not so good, then what I did was a waste of time. But there are some people that says, I don't really care what the output is because I am concerned with the process. What the results can be, I am not so concerned. My concern is, did I give utter commitment to the process? So the first thing that begins to, reflect to you theoretically when you look at Babasaheb is that he was not a person who was concerned too much with output. He was a person concerned with process. Every single moment, getting up, writing one newspaper article, starting this particular institution, that institution, the Labour Party, the Scheduled Caste Federation, everything. If probably he had waited for an output like some of us, probably some of the things he wouldn't have done. So the uniqueness here is that we are beginning to realize that this was a person who, when we look after 60, 70 years, realize that this is a person who has lived this life to the full. Might have died a little bit early, probably could have lived a lot more, died early, but every single day was so meaningful and so purposeful. And the reason for that, number one, as a reflection, a theoretical reflection, is that this person was a process-based person, was not an output-oriented. Output was something that came out naturally from the process. People may say, no, that's not the fact. He was very output-driven. Everything he said, there was a goal. In this particular goal, he had to achieve. He drove himself to achieve these goals. But if you look at the details of it, you will realize that many things that people at that point in time didn't find any meaning at all, yet he was still doing. And in doing it with utter seriousness and purpose, he arrived at, being what we now perceive him to be. Now, that doesn't mean that he was not concerned about output, but a person only concerned about output, sometimes they fall on the way. If the output is negative, they give up. It is only the person who's concerned with the process who never gives up. Never gives up. Because the person is not concerned about what others will say. I am concerned with what I am doing. The focus is in my process of doing. The focus is not after I have done, people say, you are so great. You are very, very nice. What you do is so. I'm not concerned about what people say. I'm concerned about what I'm doing and the seriousness of purpose at which I'm doing what I'm doing. So the difference is that, before I end this point here, the difference is that the person who's processual is less concerned about the negative or, in that sense, the positive impact of the outcome. While a person who's only outcome driven can certainly sometimes go all over the place, both in the realms of cognition, in the realms of intellect, in the realms of emotion, if the outcome is negative. You will see many people like that. I've seen many people of that particular kind in my own life, okay? Driven by outcome, and then if the outcome fails, my goodness, the whole life goes haywire. Yet I have seen some people, no matter the outcome, win or lose, succeed or don't succeed, is secondary to the seriousness of purpose that I engage with. Now, in relation to this purpose, one thing that is critical is that you cannot begin to engage in process and value process until unless you begin to understand cultivation. Because process is a cultivation. Only someone who's constantly giving focus to cultivation is processual. Some people will say, if I study hard, probably I will get something, probably I will get a job, probably I will get an educational institute of my liking. Okay. They are forcing the outcome to drive what you're doing right now. So that is generally more of a problem-solving kind. That is more of an analytical mind. That is more of a kind that is expecting realities to the outcome to define the behavior now. But a process person is always in a state of cultivation. One of the beautiful words in cultivation arises from the word, let's use the word Satipatthana, but we'll use it here, meditation. Meditation is a cultivation. There is no output expected. You might not even have any output. You might sit and meditate. And if people ask you, why are you meditating? You will say, I'm meditating because of the sake of meditation. I'm not concerned what outcome comes out from my meditation. Why are you doing Satipatthana? For the sake of, I'm doing it because I love to do it, not because I expect an output from what I do. It is from this kind of a framework and an understanding that this word cultivation arises. So many of us who are doing mindfulness meditation, or better word for that is Satipatthana or Annapanna Sati. We are doing it because we are cultivating ourselves, not because we expect anything. After I have finished Annapanna, I feel so nice. Now I feel so relaxed. Now I feel my mind has calmed down. We don't do Annapanna because of that. Or we don't do Satipatthana because of that. We do it because it's an act of cultivation of the mind. As I do it, I cultivate. As I do it, I cultivate. And what do I cultivate? My mind, my ideas, my thoughts, my body, my sense of being, my sense of everything. So this word cultivation has to be understood as something that is processual in nature, because if you use the word cultivation for a person who's too output oriented, they'll not understand what cultivation is. No, every day, come home, half an hour, read, never stop. When you come home, before dinner, sit down, half an hour, give to reading. Someone will say, what is the use of doing that? I will read only when it's needed to be read. Why should I cultivate reading? Is there a need for me to cultivate the act of reading? Baba Sahib will say, no. It's very important for you to come back home every day. For half an hour, you read. Before you sleep, read. Before you sleep, read. Because you're cultivating. And what are you cultivating? Your mind. You're cultivating your mind. So the second point, which I think is important in relation to what Dinesh has asked about this idea of cultivation, where do you locate cultivation here? Is because cultivation is actually that method, that technique, that ability, that capacity, that purpose, that meaning, that focus of a being in process. And we can see from Baba Saheb, his cultivation, sitting alone, reading this PhD, that PhD, this master's, that master's, is what made him. So now the third point that was basically spoken about is this idea called, the concept of what does it mean? What is meaning? What is meaningful? What is meaningfulness? And what is freedom from meaning? So this is a very interesting point that we have to think about. Okay, we can begin with the word mean, M-E-A-N, mean. What does this mean? There is a beautiful word called Ambedkarite Weltanschauung. So the first question is, what does it mean to use the word Weltanschauung? Weltanschauung means worldview. Okay, it means worldview. Then what does worldview mean? This is the initial step that we are talking, at least at the level of intellectualization. I'll not go to the question Vishal asked, the role of language, whether meaning exists prior to language or meaning arises with language. I will not go to that point yet. I will only indicate this idea called, what does it mean? Now there have been a lot of discussion about this. Okay, and this is, if you go to some of the studies and the debates, especially in a particular domain called post-structuralism, there's a lot of debate about this particular idea called meaning. But from a Buddhist point of view, when everything is in a state of process, when everything is in a state of impermanence, when anything is anicca, 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 the ability of the being not to find meaning, but exactly to observe meaning in process is very important, which means you might not be able to capture exactly the meaning of a word. Instead, you allow that to swim in your mind. And as it swims in that particular mind, you begin to live what that word is all about. The Buddhist framework is a very different framework. Other framework of the analytical kind, especially in Western Europe, demands that you tell me what is the meaning. And they have a dictionary for that. Why was the dictionary formed? Dictionary was basically constituted in order to help people understand the meaning of certain words that we use. In Buddhism, rarely there is a meaning. Rarely there's a dictionary. Even if you go to the sutta, okay, if you go to read to the suttas of the Buddha will never define anything. The Buddha will give you a taste of something. The Buddha will point you to something. The Buddha will indicate you to something, but the Buddha will not define it is like this. So in the Buddhist framework, when we use the word meaning, meaningful, meaningfulness, and freedom from meaning, remember, all of these are processes. Now, as a matter of debate, we can say that when you're young and when you're socializing, some of you who have children will say that I socialize my child in a language and tell them, oh, it means like this. When you use this word, it means like this. When you use that word, it means like this. Children also will come. Tell you, Dad, tell me that. Tell me, Mom, what does it mean to use the word freedom? Freedom means like this. Tell me, Baba Saheb used the word emancipation. What does it mean? So you will explain to your child, it means like this. It means like that. Some of you who have good vocabulary, you'll be able to explain better. Some of you who don't have good vocabulary, you will say, why do you have to ask these questions all the time? You will understand on your own. Go ahead. Some of us will do that. But this meaning, okay? Remember that when the minute you also, suppose now you're teaching something and you're teaching your child, and the minute your child says, I understand that, what you're meaning, or I understand, Mom, what you're meaning, then you also feel happy. Now the child understands what I'm saying. Why are you saying that? Why are you happy that the child have understood or not? Because you believe that if the child understands what you're saying, the child will deepen one's own experience, will deepen one's own framework, will deepen one's own understanding, and will begin to behave from that particular meaningful location. That's why we are teaching. Otherwise, why would we teach? So the response that I want to give, not to go into the details, but this meaning, meaningfulness, and till the point of freedom from meaning is a process. And while mean is the first element which is embedded in the structure of language, meaning is a process in which you embed through socialization. Meaningfulness is a state in which you begin now to understand the world and make in relationship with the world. Freedom from meaning is something totally different. It's a state of being of the person in mind. And I think Anuradha has beautifully said, what's the difference between meaningfulness and freedom from meaning? For me, freedom from meaning is a higher stage. But the stage before you reach, you have to have meaningfulness. No one can free themselves from the structure of meaning unless they have reached the end point of meaningfulness. And meaningfulness is binary in nature. And I think Vishal has put it beautifully. In the dissolution of the binary, which means in the dissolution of the relative condition of meaning and meaningfulness, you free yourself from meaning. Yeah. Now you have become free from meaning. So this point that was made by Anuradha has to be understood as a process. We should not look at it analytically, not try to, like the scientists will take and cut it right, left in order to understand the elements of what constitutes this concept called meaning. In Buddhism, we are looking at it as a process. Now, this point about behavior, I think, is a very important thing. Why is it that we must engage with this thing called behavior? Oh, you have talked about the idea of, let's say, relationship. You've talked about this notion of value. You've talked about a frame of reference. You've talked about the conceptual structure that is grounded fundamentally on language. What about behavior? Now, the question of behavior, and the reason that I do not put behavior as an element of meaning, is because the behavior is an outcome of all of these four processes that takes place. There are so many people who are in one way aware of these so-called processes of meaning making and the meaning making theoretical structure, but are not aware of their behavior. They can see others' behavior, but they are not aware of their own behavior. So you can see my behavior in the way I speak, and you will say, I like my behavior, I don't like that behavior, I like this, I don't like that, I disgust this, I distaste this. You might say that. But you're not able to look at your own behavior. And your own behavior is not part of the meaning-making structure in your life. Until someone points out, the way you behave is not good, I don't like the way you behave. Now, why do you look in that particular manner? Why do you wear that kind of clothes? Why do you talk in that particular manner? Why are you so aggressive? Why are you so reactive? I mean, someone say like that, then suddenly you become aware. Really? I am like that? And then it seeps back into the relationship, into the frame of reference, into this thing called what you value, and to this whole thing what you understand, called the conceptual apparatus or the conceptual frame. Now, that doesn't mean that behavior is not part of the meaning-making frame. No, it might not be for you, but it is for others who watch you. So if someone comes to me and behave in a particular manner, then I would say, Ari, there's such a meaningful behavior. It's meaningful to me, but you do not know whether it's meaningful to yourself, which means you have no consciousness of that behavior in yourself. But human beings do use behavior as a means to evaluate meaning in this notion called relationship. So if you're in a family and suddenly one of the member of the family doesn't behave well, it throws the whole system all over the place. You enter a state of disequilibrium, okay? Because a single behavior of one particular member of a family, okay, does not fall firmly into the meaning-making framework in the family. But when everybody basically behaves properly in the particular role that you have assigned within that particular framework, then the whole system is a state of equilibrium and properly, smoothly working. So it means to say that behavior is also an important component. It's not that we are not negating behavior, but in meaning making as a structure in which we are discussing, I have left out that particular component because it is less to do with the self and more to do with the observation of the other in relation to the self. So that's the reason why I've kind of left out, but that does not mean that it's not important at all. Now, I think the fifth point, which some of you have mentioned, is why is it that there's so much stress by Buddhists about this notion of the present? Why is it that Buddhism says live in the present, live in the present? Now, for this, I don't think we have the time today, but for this, we have to go back to the Patiksha Samuppada, because it is in this particular so-called theory of dependent origination of Buddhism that you can begin to understand what present is all about. And this idea of the element of jati, jara, marana, okay, life, aging, and death. Life is the past. Birth is the past. Birth, aging, and death. Birth is the past. Aging is the present, and death is the future. Why do Buddhists stress on the notion of the present? A focus attention on this process of what is happening to you right now, rather than on focusing on the birth or on focusing on the future, which is death. Now, in Buddhism, especially in the Zen tradition, beautiful tradition, the stress on the present is because they believe that, yes, there is a past, there is a future, but the past is gone and the future has not come. All that you have access to this thing called life, is the present. And a being who can live in the present is not defined either by the past, nor defined either by the future. All human beings don't live like that. Many of us don't live in the present. We always live either in the past or in the future. Even sitting to me right here, listening to me while talking, you are not living in the present. I'm saying something and you're thinking, Ari, yesterday that person said this in relation to what he's saying. Is it meaningful or not meaningful? No, I don't agree with this. What will happen tomorrow if he says like this? You're not even living in the present. You're not hearing me. Your mind is actually running around between the past and the future. Okay? And natural, because this is the way we have socialized. Okay? Some of you, for instance, who are writing notes, if you're writing note and listen to me, you are closer to the present, but you're still not living in the present. Because you're fighting between listening to me, making meaning with what I say, and writing. Human beings are conditioned in a manner in which they generally do not experience the present. They always live either in the past or in the future. The Zen tradition simply says this: if you want enlightenment, now is the moment. There is no future and there is no past. Now, this is very interesting in the light of the debates taking place, especially in other domains of knowledge called science. People are beginning to realize that actually you don't have a future nor a past. You only have the present. And the day you can live in the present, the future and the past has vanished. The other way to express it in order to have a clarity is, some of us who have experienced, let's say, depression, sadness, pain, okay? Someone has experienced tremendous pain. The Buddhist answer is live in now, live now. Because the minute you don't live now, you will begin to experience suffering. Why? Because now you are linking that pain either to the past or to the future. What will happen to my life if I have to experience this pain throughout? Oh, yesterday was so beautiful. Look at me now, where I am. And I have to carry this pain. If only that yesterday comes back, everything will be okay. In the Buddhist tradition, wait, live now. Don't allow suffering to arise out of the pain that you experience now. And the difference between pain and suffering is, pain is what you experience now, while suffering is when you relate the future and the past to what is the pain happening now. So there are many ways in which you can express and you can engage a little bit more deeply with this idea called the past, the present, and the future, because this is one of the most sophisticated framework within Buddhism. But I think I'll leave it at this point here. Now, the last point, which I just want to kind of throw a little bit in the light of what we are discussing with this concept of frame of reference. Now, frame of reference, all of us have a frame of reference. And fortunately or unfortunately, as human beings, you are always in a frame of reference. You're not out of a frame of reference. And this frame of reference is the overarching framework or the overarching theoretical structure, or in that sense, an overarching epistemological structure by which meaning takes place. And each of us are groomed in this frame of reference. And especially as Buddhists, we are more conscious about this because we know it exists. So when we look at your family, you groom your family in a frame of reference. When you are looking at your child, you groom your child in a frame of reference. Okay? We don't teach your child behave like this, behave like that. We are saying there is this thing called the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. When you embrace it, it means like this. It means that you're creating a frame of reference. Okay? Now, this frame of reference is important because human beings cannot live immediately without a frame of reference. Otherwise, they will not know how to relate to reality. Because a frame of reference allows you to relate to reality easily. Okay? Some children will come home and say, today I had a fight. I don't understand why that person fought with me. That person was basically, insulting me. I don't know why person was insulting me. That person says that, the way you talk is not nice. Why did that person say that? And as a parent, you will say, you must understand what is the meaning of this. Why did this person insult you? In relation to what? And how should you respond to this? Why you should not react? So you're explaining a frame of reference. You're giving a frame of reference to your child. And so it happens to all of us also. It's not only to the children. Now, this frame of reference is something that we cannot live. It is there. It exists in all of us. But the question that was asked here is, what is the relationship, or how is it different from a discourse? You have a frame of reference. Is that frame of reference to be equated with a discourse? Is there a difference in meaning between discourse and frame of reference? Is that question that you asked. Now we can go into the details of it, and there's no need. The only thing is that you can say that a frame of reference also is a discourse, but probably an overarching frame of reference, let's say Buddhism, the frame of reference called Buddhism. What is that frame of reference? Tiratana, Sarana, theory of dependent origination, the idea of noble truth, the idea of noble path, the idea of anicca, the idea of dukkha, the idea of anatta, all of this that constitute the Buddhist frame of reference itself, as it overarches all of us, it becomes a discourse. But discourse is more political. Frame of reference is political, but not so political because it gives immediate meaning to our life. But a discourse is political. Why? Because there are multiple discourses. One discourse against another discourse. In India, we know it all the time because we experience it all the time. There are so multiple discourses, and these discourses are challenging each other. And as we know, the Buddhist discourse vanished from this country for the past 2,300 years. And now, after Baba Sahib embraced Buddhism, this discourse has risen back again, and it's become a very powerful discourse in the light of the Indian condition in relation to other discourses. So rather than using the word discourse, I use the word frame of reference as part of the structure and the theory of meaning. I didn't say discourse as one of the elements in the structure of meaning. Anyway, I think we always can discuss more, but I will stop here a little bit. And I will ask Dr. Narendra to kind of.
Yeah. So thank you so much again. Such a lovely clarification on all those questions which was raised, and I particularly, it made me so clear about, like, I stuck to the point that whether there is a meaning in Buddhism to the various concepts that basically we were having of, like, so, and that was what is something which I was really trying to find, whether there is something which is each of these concepts and how does that really, that meaning is, or whether each of those has any purpose, and what now it makes very clear, very rightly said by Bodhi, is that the Buddha's philosophy is very processual philosophy. It's very contextual, and so the meaning also is very contextual. It means, like, at what point you may understand or make meaning, which is very different, and that is also then it's the kind of frame of reference that we basically know, the structure that we basically having of is also something which is contextual. We need to understand how the frame of reference and the meaning that we give to each of those becomes very interesting. And these particular areas then we really make us to think very in detail, and this is something which is very important for us to think on. Uh, so I think this leaves us to think on so much on those areas. Thank you so much to all the Sangha members having so important, valid questions. And most important, I really want to thank you, Bodhi, Dr. Shailesh, all the Sangha members, giving me an opportunity to take this particular and most, for me, I felt is very tricky area to understand and even to grapple with. Made it quite clear and simpler in terms of now my understanding, and I can now able to really relate. So thank you so much. I took up this difficult task, and now I feel is yes, it's relaxing and quite a few things very clear. So thank you so much. Thank you everybody.